Welcome to the Carrier Signals podcast. I'm your host, Rich Barron, and I'm here with an esteemed guest, Major David McBride, who's an ex-barrister and major in the Army, who's now facing potentially the rest of your life in jail for whistleblowing military crimes allegedly committed by Australian forces in Afghanistan. Welcome, David. Would you like to start by introducing yourself, please? Maybe state your vocational experience and credentials.
Thank you for having me on your show, Rich. It's the honour is mine. I went to school in Australia, did a law degree in Sydney University. I went and did a master's degree in Oxford University. After that, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I joined the Australian Defence Force, not the Australian, the British Army.
You're a major in the British Army.
I was a captain in the British Army. I went to Sandhurst though. I went to Northern Ireland as a platoon commander in Northern Ireland. I wasn't a lawyer in those days. I was just a normal soldier. I was in NATO when the Berlin Wall was up. I did security work in Africa after I left the British Army, diamond mines and personal protection. Then I worked on doing security work for a sort of major documentary series called Journeys to the Ends of the Earth. We went to Afghanistan, Sudan, Iran, a lot of sort of the outlaw countries, what they used to call the axis of evil. And then I came back to Australia and I finally got a job as a lawyer.
As a barrister?
I was a barrister, mainly doing criminal law, and rejoined the army because I missed the service. I missed that experience of really doing something I can be proud of at the end of each day. Joined the Australian Army the first time, but rejoined. I don't consider it that different. I felt like we were doing the right thing.
This is circa what year?
2005. I was a reservist, and I didn't go full time until 2009, I think. Then we got in at the deep end, posted straight to Townsville, Army capital of Australia, and then we were sent out to Afghanistan. I did a tour in 2011. Then I went to work at Special Forces headquarters, and then I went on a tour to Afghanistan with Special Forces in 2013.
So you're an Oxford-educated barrister who's seen serious combat. You were not in some bureaucratic position within the army as an army lawyer. You actually served using weaponry, having skirmishes, deployed to Afghanistan twice.
And that's right, yeah. I was a platoon commander in Northern Ireland when people were getting killed. People in our company got killed, blown up. I was on the ground with a rifle commanding 30 people. Went to Sandhurst. I went to platoon commander's battle course. Tried out for the British SAS a couple of times.
Tell me about that. Tell me about your attempts to join the SAS.
It's pretty cutthroat, and you tend to get injured and fall down. I almost drowned in a creek in Wales, even, which I thought was kind of ironic, because it was swollen with a lot of water, and I fell in, and it wasn't that deep, and I've got a 40-pound pack on my back, and a head's going under, and I can't let go of the weapon because if I did that, I'd fail. So
which weapon were you carrying?
SA-80, I think it was called, whatever the standard weapon was. Yeah, taking in water in my mouth and starting to lose consciousness. Anyway, luckily I got washed up and got out and completed the course. Anyway, but I passed that physical stage, and then they have something else called Officers Week where you have to make plans. And I passed that, so it's smart enough. But then you go to something called the jungle where you go to Borneo. In fact, where we were today, I've just been hiking around northern New South Wales. It reminded me a bit of the jungles of Borneo. Being sort of rainforesty trees,
subtropical environment,
creeks with big rocks, crossing over creeks with fallen logs,
but no insurgents that I'm aware of.
No insurgents, no ambushes, no even pretend ambushes. In fact, I've always thought that I failed the jungle twice. They brought me back to do it again. It's kind of a long, painful process. My failure of British SAS selection, but I could see it was quite beautiful, the jungle, and but of course you weren't able to enjoy it because you got people shouting at you the whole fucking time. Why are you doing this? Where? Get down! Where? Or all that basic training on steroids, because everyone is at fairly high standard, training you as an experienced SAS soldier. So it's pretty fucking tough. I could see even amongst all that misery, it was quite beautiful, And I thought one day I'd like to come back. You sleep in hammocks at night, and it's quite, when you're not getting shouted at, it's quite unpleasant. One of the strange things about the jungle, Borneo, there's a lot of weird noises, weird fucking noises.
Yeah.
And you think, what is even making
We have that around here too.
Yeah. You know how like a possum makes that weird noise?
Yeah. Screeching bats.
Yeah. And you're thinking, apparently some of it's insects and even lizards, but they make noises like, you'd think it sounds like a siren or something. It's perfectly pitch black. So you've got no idea of seeing what it is because there's no stars even. It's all, the canopy blocks it out. And it also means that if you drop anything on the ground, your torch you're not going to find it. You're out, it's really, I found it very, very hard actually. Like being in a cupboard with the door closed and no light.
And you came out with 2 combat service medals?
I came out with quite a few different, medals. You get 2 for being in Afghanistan for NATO. I got a combat service support, badge. I got the SAS war, the Special Forces one, which they try to take off everybody, but I got that one.
You're a highly decorated soldier.
Yeah, well, and I got a Northern Ireland medal, so it's certainly I'm a soldier, yeah.
And presumably you have or had a fairly major allegiance to the army, the culture of the army.
Yeah, I loved it. I always wanted to be my parents were quite amused by that. I always wanted to be a soldier, even as a kid. My parents were doctors, so that's not what they wanted for me. I was in a guard, what they call a guards regiment, which is the sort of oldest and most the posh sort of regiments, and it's all about standards and question of doing the right thing in every regard, and I loved that.
So the imperative for wanting to be a soldier and having this deep connection to military life, was that born of patriotism?
In the wide sense, it wasn't. I'm not of Australian. I don't have a love it or leave it sticker on the back of my I do believe it's kind of a bit, sad. I love parliamentary democracy. I love the rule of law. I like the 1,000-year history of the birth of democracy. English Civil War, Cavaliers versus Roundheads, people who died for our democratic freedoms. In popular mythology, Braveheart, I love that kind of stuff. For the idea that you'd fight for, we have to fight for what is good, what is right against the oppressor. I love that, the stories of the resistance in the Second World War. And I love the idea of fighting for what is right. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the British Army. The Warsaw Pact, as we called them, the Soviet Union, it was we were in fear of them much more than we are the Chinese. That there was going to be a Third World War, or it was going to be nuclear and tanks rolling through Germany again. So, I felt being part of that, it was a really kind of noble thing to do. But we studied tank battles. We studied artillery barrages on large scale, bombers, artillery. In fact, being based in Germany as part of the British Army, they'd say, when they war gamed, what would happen if the Russians or the Soviets decided to go west? Your life expectancy for a NATO tank soldier was 3 minutes.
Wow, that's epic.
Which we loved, which we wore as a badge of courage, or at least black humour. When we went out drinking sprees.
I can add some more black humor to that, which is, did you ever consider the fact that you risked your ass for kids just to post crap on TikTok and pout on Instagram?
I know. I do often wonder about that. But I mean, your life, look at you. You're a good example. To a certain extent, your life story selects you rather than the other way around. You could not have predicted what happened to you. And yet you've worn it with good grace, and it's come out, and now you probably wouldn't want to change it. But
Thank you. You're too kind. Yeah, we'll get to the corollaries in our story in a sec, but I should just preface that by saying that I'm the producer director of Marijuana Australiana, a feature film about cannabis in Australia, and related to the film, but really not related to the film. I was raided and was up for 42 years in jail. I believe I've heard conflicting reports. You're either up for an indeterminate period of time in jail, or I think Friendly Geordie said maybe it was 40 years.
We changed it a bit because it's sort of again, it's depending on the audience, black humor, or we don't want to freak people out. But yeah, I'm in some ways I'm proud of it. It's unlimited. It's actually unlimited. And the prosecutor said that he was embarrassed to have to admit that. The judge was saying, you know, in the early stages, Mr. So-and-so, whatever his name is, can you tell us what is the maximum for this charge? And he said, Your Honour, it's unlimited.
It's unlimited.
So because it's, you know, it's against an espionage, I guess the option is that they would, you know, they could execute you. It wouldn't make it. That's what I say to them. And I hate that. I just say it wouldn't matter to me if you were going to execute me. I'd still be pleading not guilty because I believe in what I'm doing. And you wouldn't be a soldier unless you were prepared to stand up for that. But yeah, it's kind of funny, isn't it? It's unlimited. So I kind of like, you know, with whistleblowers, you laugh because you even have a little bit of competition amongst other whistleblowers. And so when people are like facing 100 years, I'm like, yeah, actually, I'm facing unlimited.
100 years, you pussy. That's nothing. I was only up for 42. I must look like...
They're going to keep my bones. But I mean, obviously, I'm not going to live that long. But we just used to say 50 because it blows people's minds too much.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a nice round number.
Yeah, it's a nice round number. It's the maximum years I've got to live anyway. So,
and we should mention the fact that you've been awaiting trial for, I think, up to 4 years. Is that correct?
It's 5, actually.
It's been 5 years.
I've been charged for 5 years. I first started agitating 10 years ago, like in September 2013, almost exactly. And I don't know if you've read the writings of a guy called Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Outliers.
You're really... Yeah, Outliers.
Yeah.
So you're an educated man. And he has this theory about 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
Which is basically 10 years of work, you know. And I've now completed 10 years. 10 years as a sort of activist whistleblower.
10,000 hours of shit stirring.
Yes, it's perfectly, thank God it's just ticked over. So when I go to court, I'll be ready to be like...
You'll be an expert.
Outlier. Yeah.
Classified expert.
I'll be like ready to take it on, you know.
Now tell me about that. It's been committed to a jury trial. And I believe there was some, what I perceive to be fairly nefarious legal trickery that went on to orchestrate that on the government side. So you're up against an Attorney General's lawyer plus the CDPP, Commonwealth Department of...
strange acronym I could never get right.
Yeah.
The CDPP.
The federal prosecutor.
The federal prosecutor.
So you're up against 2 adversaries.
Yeah.
And they called 22 witnesses. Is that correct?
Something like that.
I believe they called 22, but they disallowed you from calling 2.
I wasn't allowed to call any, yeah. The hardest person is not the prosecutor. They're not too bad. It's the Attorney General. You don't even know what they're doing there. They say, we're here to protect the information. And by doing that, they don't allow any of my information in, but they allow...
That's right. As a matter of national security, right? They vetoed
they allow
your
all the
information.
prosecutors.
How does that make you feel?
Yeah, at first it used to make me angry, but now this is why interviews with people like you are great, they're gold, because I can laugh when I'm talking to you. It boosts your spirit because it's obviously unfair and ridiculous. It's hard to keep that sort of bravado when you're in court.
Absolutely.
You feel great and you get out. You're outside, I mean. You get there and there's all these, they're all serious. Some of them are even young. It'd be okay if they're all old funny days. You could kind of laugh at them. Some of them are young and they're all working for the attorney and you kind of think, really, did you go to law school to be doing this?
My barrister said a trained monkey could be a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, in this case, yeah. They probably could do a good job, you know, and that's right, because they're just following orders.
And just to reflect a little bit more, my barrister was Adam Morrison, who's an absolute gun. And I ended up, after having, it was either 10 or 15 charges related to psychedelic research and medical cannabis going back a long time ago. I was raided in 2014, back when those worlds were fairly nascent and drug law reform was not what it is now. There was no multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry. There was no phase 3 clinical trials for MDMA for PTSD, for instance. So I was involved sort of on the fringes with all of that. I had 12 court appearances, and it felt like a war of attrition. They wanted to wear me down. Every time they adjourned it for some technicality, it was another 3 months of wait, another 3 months of reporting to the cops every day and piss tests and all this shit I had to do for a year and a half in court. Are you experiencing a similar thing? A sense of being worn down by the process, perhaps even intentionally?
Yeah, I think so. And that's why I always try to smile and laugh anyway, but I try to look good. It's actually a legitimate expense. It should be part of my tax deductible, to train, a little bit of spray tan, because I don't want to give them the pleasure. You see, the classic whistleblower is this guy who's hunched over, smoking, overweight. I don't want to give them the pleasure to say that, well, he might have won the case, but look at him, we've destroyed him.
It's so much about puffing chests out.
Yeah,
I've
they
got to
want
say,
to be able to make you look like
That's right.
you're guilty, you're downtrodden.
That's right.
And they hate it when you're not. I know that Mike Pizzullo is feeling like razor blades going down. When he sees me laughing, smiling, looking good, they hate that. They absolutely hate that.
Yeah, you definitely don't strike me as having any diminutive qualities about you.
No, we don't. Yes, exactly. We just stand tall and whatever happens. I mean, because if a conviction under this totally unfair regime won't make me any less of a man, or any less of, in some ways, it'll make me bigger. I'll go into jail with my head held up high, and I'll come out of jail even bigger to say I was prepared to go to jail for what I believed in. And that's something. And my enemies wouldn't give up their lunch money.
Moreover, you're prepared to risk your life. You're prepared to die for this cause. And you've credited that as being something that's been catalyzed by your oath to the same military complex, shall we say, that is out to prosecute you.
Yeah. Whether we want to admit it or not, we get our driving motivations from popular imagery. And I think it's not impossible for people to say that sometimes you see the movie and the bad guys can take over the corporation. The bad guys can take over the military. It's not that impossible. I don't think I'm really fighting the Australian military. I represent the true values of the Australian military, and I'm fighting a lot of sort of dipshits who have taken it over and need to be kicked out because they've become yes men and women who are just doing political bullshit.
Do you think it's an influential minority, the people committing these alleged atrocities?
I think no. Well, it's probably it could be a majority. I mean, it's close. There's a lot of good people, but it's been insidious, and all government departments are like that. They're becoming increasingly politicized. People who just want to get ahead. I mean, the minister who's an elected person, the one I'm fighting was a lawyer, maybe, but not much of a lawyer. In Labor Party, he spent his whole time in Labor Party, but he knows about polling, he goes around kissing babies and whatever. Now that guy, he knows nothing about strategy or, apart from political backstabbing, probably an expert at that, is suddenly running the minutiae of the way we fight a war. Now he's got no right to do that.
For political expediency and probably political image.
All done by image. I mean, the way he's going to fight a war, and he'd think I'm mad to suggest otherwise, is a way that is going to make him look good because he wanted to become the treasurer, and then from the treasurer he wanted to become the PM. So he's going to do, the only thing he's going to do with the military is use it to make him look good.
And I guess the Afghani alleged victims are simply puppets there, for want of a better expression.
He couldn't give a shit about
collateral damage.
Afghan dying, Australian dying. The only thing he cares about is if the media find out about it. That's why we have this weird, strange paradox where we care about some deaths, but we don't care about others.
Absolutely.
The media hear about it. Oh my God, I'm so shocked. Well, let's do something.
Yeah.
Media don't hear about it.
That's right. It's like a moral hierarchy.
No problem, because they only care about their image. So, yeah, we had witch hunts when the media cared. We put people in jail who didn't deserve it when there was media mileage to be made out of it. And we lionized people who certainly didn't deserve it because it was good copy. And that I found disgusting. For a professional soldier who grew up in the old days, that you just do not, you do not do that. You do not sacrifice good people for the minister to look good, and you certainly don't lionize bad people because the minister wants a good news story that day.
It's interesting that you've joined this lineage of whistleblowers. And if we go back to the Pentagon Papers with Daniel Ellsberg, this fellow who is lauded for his actions, as far as I'm aware, he's not considered in the same light as, let's say, Assange or yourself or Witness K. And it's interesting that he photocopied manually, pre-digital, 7,000 sheets of paper and smuggled them out of the Pentagon. So I was interested to know about the mechanics of how you actually got the data, how much data there was, what format it was in, that sort of thing.
I did the same. I'm not going to let Ellsberg one up me. I photocopied. Well, I didn't photo. At least we had a sort of printers where I could press print, and a 60-page document would go. Brrr. Yeah, that was hard yards he must have done. But I was similar to him. I used to stay in work late because I made up my mind what I was going to do. And I was abusing amphetamine at the time. So I used to...
You were abusing amphetamine?
Yeah, abusing
amphetamine. Was it Dexedrine?
Yeah, Dexedrine.
The military bloody love Dexedrine.
Well, it's good. Yeah, it stops you crashing your helicopter.
Well, it also makes you, according to the Collateral damage WikiLeaks video, apparently those guys were on Dexedrine and they had serious trigger finger. I believe they were up for 5 days and got a bit tweaky.
Lack of sleep, but of course it affects that.
Just quickly on that, how did you find the Dex? Did it make you into the superhuman killing machine?
Superhuman whistleblowing machine. But which focused. Backfired on. I was very focused. But I mean, it doesn't change your decision making. I'd already made up my mind what I was going to do, but I just needed to stay up a lot because I had no choice but to print documents all night. And do my day job in the day.
And do it surreptitiously.
Yeah, exactly. And that was pretty hard. And we also lived, the barracks was a bungadore and we lived in Canberra. So it was a fair drive. I still got PTSD about that drive because it just reminded me of a really bad stage in my life. This is how far wrong we've gone as a country. Someone would have got millions and millions of dollars in government contract to put in this state-of-the-art security system.
100%.
Put your hand down and iris.
Biometrics.
Biometrics. But I was able, despite that, to print off.
You exploited it.
Thousands
you circumvented the system.
And just walked out with them.
Are you comfortable explaining how you did that? Or
well,
they probably plugged it up now.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like, and so it was just still bullshit. Someone you would have charged the government to say there's no way. And you know what? This is how ridiculous it was. There was two printers. One was for secret and one was for non-secret because you got two computers, and they tried to stop people. Be careful of the secret one because the paper in the secret printer was pink.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it got jammed.
No. So what you could do, but they weren't locked. So you could just take out the pink paper, put white paper in.
Wow.
And then when they walked out, they say, is that secret? No, look, it's white paper.
So it's a manual exploit. Simple as that.
You could just change the paper.
Simple as that.
And that's how pathetic it was.
In the case of Chelsea, then Bradley Manning, who obviously leaked all the cables to WikiLeaks, that created the whole furore around Julian Assange, he famously went into the system that he said, or she said, that all these thousands of military personnel had access to these servers and these systems. And back then he burnt it all to a CD, wrote Lady Gaga on it and walked out.
I know. It's pretty classic, isn't it? Nobody thought to. He said, "I like to listen to music." I didn't have to do the Edward Snowden thing where I put it in the Rubik's cube and threw it over the thing. But it's like that. Yeah, you'd be friendly with the staff and how's it going?
Social engineering.
Yeah, but I didn't have to do anything like that.
And how long did this whole process take?
About 6 months.
Wow.
And it's good, but I've got in the process of me writing a detailed complaint because I tried to do it within the system. I said, I'm going to set out everything that I think is wrong.
So you made an internal...
I made an internal complaint and I gathered all the documents to support that internal complaint.
What happened with that?
Yeah, they just fobbed it off, as you'd imagine, and particularly as a military lawyer, because one of your jobs is to fob off internal complaints. And so I knew what they were going to do with it. And they write this long, beautifully written, long-winded thing saying we've considered and starve it of oxygen, keep it for about a year, and say, but he's got no case.
Right.
And I knew they'd do that, but because you're effectively you're complaining the very people that you reckon have committed crimes. You're complaining about them. So what are they going to do? Oh yeah, you got us.
Investigate themselves.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You got us, Major McBride. Yeah, I think we'll resign and we'll make you CDF. No, they're not going to do that, are they? They're going to come after you, and that's exactly what happened.
So have you actually been in touch with Edward Snowden or any of these other whistleblower
No,
characters?
I follow him on Twitter. Have you seen the Mauritanian, a movie anyway, it's a movie about a Guantanamo Bay prisoner, and it's dramatized, it's very good. And
I've seen the Errol Morris documentary, and it's standard operating procedure, I think it is, and it's absolutely a cracker of a film.
Yeah, confronting as. And this is a very good, this is a sort of Hollywood movie. Jodie Foster's in it, and she plays this hard-ass American lawyer who's very heroic. And I've forgotten what her name is, the real person, but she retweeted one of my tweets, and I felt that's close.
Vindicated.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is Nancy Hilando, I think her name is. And yeah, she's like a proper celebrity lawyer.
Yeah.
And I was like,
and you're in her consciousness, mate.
Yeah, I was very happy with that.
So at what point then, once you're being stonewalled by the military after reporting officially to them this information, what point did you decide to go to the ABC and Fairfax?
It took about 2 years. I still wanted to maintain my career, but I was angry about. I really felt Australia wasn't protected. The Defence Force was such a can of worms, such a political mess, where the only things that ever got done were PR. You know, there was no Defence Force. There was a sort of PR advertising agency. Put photos of submarines, photos of jets, you know, but there was no plan to actually defend Australia any more than there was a plan to win the war in Afghanistan. It's all run according to what the minister's PR people want.
It's a bit propagandist.
It's like utopia is real, you know, that hollow men utopia, circular political bullshit is absolutely real.
And when you think about the amount of money they burn on this complex for it to be
because
PR
everybody gets
juggernaut.
a kick, you know, you know, everyone gets a kickback. Like the guy who bought the submarines from France signed off on it. He spent 6 months in France, traveling around, going to shadows, and you get away with that stuff like that. For the people who are doing deals with America, everybody who's buying the new US sub will be getting some sort of a kickback
100%.
Promotion. And that's what they're doing. They're not doing it for Australia. They're doing it for themselves.
And a revolving door of industry, I imagine.
Revolving door of industry. You know, they're going straight from, you know, their job to think tank, you know, getting paid twice as much money to bring defence on board, you know. It's a can of worms. And what I wanted it to be like Watergate, in that I wanted some really good journalists to drill down. I had some information, but I only had half the picture. I wanted the sort of Bernstein and Woodward to call in, because I really wanted to pin it on either the Prime Minister or the Defence Minister. I'm sure that they all knew.
The Prime Minister at the time was?
Gillard, I think.
Gillard.
Yeah. Rudd Gillard. It's hard to keep track.
And who was the Chief of the Defence Force, do you remember?
David Hurley.
It was David Hurley, who's now the Governor-General.
He's now the Governor-General. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he got promoted to Governor of New South Wales and then Governor-General, and then Scott Morrison got him to sign off on all the dodgy ministries, and he just did it. And he didn't, not only did he sign off on them, he didn't publish it like they would normally do to say, I've just appointed a new minister. They must have known he's the sort of guy who just does what he's told and doesn't ask questions. And and he's got rewarded with his job. Now that is corruption in the sense that you protect the government rather than protecting the country.
That is a model government employee, my friend.
Well, I say it's treason. And it's funny because it's the battle of they say
you're treacherous.
They say I'm the treasonous. I reckon that's treason. Just to put your own the definition of treason must be putting selfish interests above the national interests. And I reckon he's done it.
It's similar to the corporate world. This is, it rewards psychopathy.
Yeah, well, I think it does. And these are all lessons I've learned late in life. I didn't think so. And I used to always think, oh, well, he's a billionaire. He must be okay. He must have something going for him. The older I get, I'm beginning to think, you can just be a psychopath and get rich, but you don't necessarily have any redeeming qualities at all.
Well, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, narcissism,
Narcissism,
dark triad, mate. That'll reward you with career ascendancy.
Yeah, you could be a really shit human being, but have $1 billion.
So, in a sense, you were overt whistleblowing. I don't want to speak for you, but
no, it's pretty overt. Yeah, I did. I found hard to find a journalist because they would run a bad soldier story, but they're not. That's not my target. My target is the senior, the generals, the minister, because I reckon if we don't stop the bullshit merry-go-round now, we're going to be going to another war 5 years' time. It may be even more serious. We have to start telling the truth. We have to not just be making stuff up and then chase the end. We have to break that cycle, because putting a couple of corporals in jail is not going to fix the problem. But anyway, in the world we live in, you would have experienced this yourself. Journalists, it's different to the Vietnam days. They won't rock the boat so much to bring a government down. They'll run a bad soldier story, but they won't run a bad government story.
Well, it's fear of reprisal, possibly.
Well, of course. And you can't really blame them, because they have tax benefits from the government. They have licenses they've got to pay. The government, for a newspaper like The Australian, the government's the biggest advertiser. So they're not going to piss the government off. Well, they might pick piecemeal, but they're not going to run an anti-government.
They're not going to stop the circle jerk.
No, they're not. And that is one of the problems. And this is there's a perception. This is one of the problems with the public interest disclosure. There's some sort of perception to say, once you go and see the media, they will do a fantastic story and, you'll get some sort of retribution. But of course, that's far from, you've had experiences, that's far from guaranteed. They may not run it. If they do run it, they may run a totally different story to what you wanted. And even if it does come out, the public, nothing may happen. So it's a very inexact science.
I think that journalism, unfortunately, and I don't want to besmirch my friends who are journalists, but fuck you guys for a second, honestly. There's so much PR regurgitation going on.
Yeah, well, it's one of the worst things, of course, because it's laziness. And they say things like, we can't run an anti-defense story because then they won't invite us to their launch next week.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's kind of true, but it's like, really? If Australia's going to fall down because you don't cover the story, is it really because you're worried you're going to miss out on the free lunch next week?
Now, the antithesis to all of that, as far as I'm concerned, is Friendly Geordies, Jordan Shanks. I know.
He doesn't hold back with journalists. I've seen him attack that even I'm wincing after I watch him give someone a going over. It reminds me of the Joe Pesci, that big mafia character who's shot someone and then he's kicking him to death.
Yeah, absolutely.
He goes hard, doesn't he?
He goes hard. It's not even flogging a dead horse, though. There's just more dirt that comes up that he exhumes,
He's a good hater when he gets caught. I mean, look, fair enough, because they do hate. They started it, as he would have said. They drew first blood.
He also had his house firebombed. And he's still going.
They were sort of downing him as like, what do they used to call him? He's a racist, or they gave him. Crikey made the mistake of giving him arse hat of the year, and he was. The mainstream did kind of really put him down to begin with. A fair bit, and now they can't be surprised that he's come back to bite.
If you want to see a more articulate takedown of a journo than my little quip before, definitely go watch some of his pieces where he eviscerates these journalists that casually sort of mention him, and he tears them a new one, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
So you leaked these documents to the national broadcaster, the ABC, and Fairfax, and they produced 6 or 7 pieces on it. At what point did you realize the gravity of what you'd done?
Yeah, I think as soon as I saw the Afghan Files, and I remember exactly where I was on a plane coming out of Canberra, and it came up on my screen, thousands of documents being released. I saw it and I thought, fuck, you're going to get arrested. Because there was a fair bit of time after I saw them before I published it, because I'm very happy, and I must say I'm very grateful. There have been some very, very brave stories. The Nick McKenzie story, Chris Masters. I mean, that's a hell of a story. And Mark Willisey, Dan Oakes as well. I mean, they could easily walk the other way, and where we laugh at them. Australia would be worse off if they weren't prepared to take those and all their producers and whatever. There's obviously a team of people. So, yeah, I mean, jokes aside, that was pretty good. But there was a fair bit of going back and forward. And I can understand it because I was, as I said, I was really trying to push a bad government story. They weren't really interested in that. It's the fog of war to a certain extent. They knew some things I didn't know. And I knew some things they didn't know. And I've grown up with all those Second World War analogies, but a bit like the sort of dropping the dam buster bomb that goes down and then it goes off and the Germans don't think it's even done anything, but it's cracked the dam and they don't even know. And it won't take long before the pressure. And that was a bit like the Afghan story. I mean, I knew then, I knew something was going to happen, but I also knew I'd have to leave the country. And I did. It took me a few months, but there was, we know now that the day it came out, the CDF called the chief of the Defence Force called the chief of the AFP and basically said, "Fuck you, find this guy." And it was.
And where were you in the world?
Well, I was in Canberra, but I was getting out of Canberra very fast, and I got a trip to Spain. I knew I was sort of vaguely happy about being in Spain because I knew that it was hard to extradite from there. And sure enough, they raided my house.
Tell me about that.
The documents.
You living in Sydney at the time?
Well, I had an apartment in Canberra, but I was renting an Airbnb or something.
But the feds descended upon your place.
The feds came to my ex-wife's house first.
Oh, God, that would have.
And that was quite funny because she was like, they didn't seem like real feds to me. I think they, they showed her the badges. And she's so funny. She was like, they didn't look like real badges. Anyway, they obviously were real badges. And eventually they were obviously too polite. Then they went to my place because she said he doesn't live here anymore. We're divorced. And she knew. And she called me and she said, yeah, the cops have been to your place. They've taken a whole lot of stuff. First thing I thought was, fuck, because I thought, why didn't you destroy it? Why didn't I destroy the documents? And I was in France then when she called, but I was just like, oh my God, because I knew then, it was the mountains were rushing in on me. I knew that this was possible, a huge sentence, and all because I hadn't destroyed the documents. So I was like, oh, but then I had a few unfiltered Camel cigarettes, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, look, you have to be honest with yourself. And I thought, you didn't destroy the documents because you didn't feel like a criminal and you felt that they vindicated you.
You had a moral imperative.
Yeah. I believed that they would clear me and I kept them because one day if I went around and, eventually I got some sort of press wanting to cover my story and I was like, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. It's really terrible. And they're like, that sounds terrible. Have you got the proof? And I didn't, it would go nowhere. But so I had to keep it, and I'm glad I did now. But yeah, at first I was like, "Oh, you idiot! Why didn't you get rid of the evidence?" And then, but it took me a couple of days, and I was like, "Yeah, look, I'm glad you kept them." I want to go. Well, I didn't immediately want to go back and fight it. I just thought about what I was going to do. And we eventually decided. The family came over, and we eventually decided I couldn't be on the run forever. And I'd go back and fight it.
It takes some time for it all to coalesce and to absorb the change.
I went up and down. I was like taking too much THC, cannabis oil, and having various different experiences. Riding my bike around Spain, some good, some bad. But something inside of me, and I was suicidal at times, but thought, you can win this. If you go back, I don't know, it was the spirit of the Anzacs. So I said, if you go back and fight this, you can win it. And you're going to need the documents, but you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to say, I was justified because what I saw was really wrong. Yeah, but you need to go back. As it turned out, it wasn't quite the way I wanted. I went back to see my daughter. Well, one of my daughters was there and she was really missing me. And she said, I want you to come back for a father-daughter dance. And I tried to say to her, look, I might get arrested. And if I get arrested, I'll be in jail, possibly be in jail for a long time, I tried to say. She said, I still want you to come back for the dance. I came back and I tried to get into the country out really quickly.
Yeah.
But of course, they came through the custom, and the guy,
Yeah.
this weedy guy, I could see he was pressing the panic button, and he was like, "Oh, have a good holiday, Mr. McBride." But he was like, and then they went through. They didn't arrest me when I came in, but I think only because they wanted to follow me. I don't know what they thought I was going to do, but they followed me that weekend. So maybe they were just being kind because I got to go to my daughter's dance.
I don't think they were being kind.
Yeah.
I think they were gathering intel. I mean, I don't know.
Probably, yeah. Anyway, and they didn't arrest me at the dance. That would have been dramatic. And then when I tried to get out of the country, daughter didn't want me to leave. I had my spies out saying, "Do they have a warrant already?"
Yeah.
And apparently they didn't. But I had to apply very quickly. When I came in the country, I had to apply. And that's why my first charge was a theft charge, which I think was the only one that they could
come up with at the time, right?
Yeah, they had to come
and
up
that's
with
a
something
federal
quickly.
charge.
Yeah, and it's got a 10-year maximum, like if you've stolen a tank or something.
Yeah.
Because they were able to say, here's the photos of because it was theft of paper.
Yep.
Theft of not even classified stuff, because the judge would have said, well, how do
Because
you
you
know
switched the
classified?
paper from pink to white.
Theft of white paper. And since it had a 10-year maximum, they could get a warrant to stop me leaving the country, and they could get it quickly. So yeah, they just rushed that through. And I got arrested at the airport, and I knew I would. I was having a few beers, thinking you're probably not going to get out. And I stuck my passport in the automatic
scanner thing. Yeah.
Put it down, and the light goes green. And I went,
you got access denied.
It was like the wall of death. And then a guy comes out and he says, "Come with me." And then the cops come out and they're like, "Do not pick up your clothes." Because they didn't know. They thought I was Osama bin Laden, as far as they knew. Because it would have said, no, national security watch list.
Yeah.
And I was lucky, New South Wales too, and lucky that they're all a bit trigger happy up there. Lucky they didn't shoot me.
And is your honorific on your passport still say major? Because you're entitled to use it once you're retired, right?
Yeah. It doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't say that. I don't think.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm entitled to use it, and I do a fair bit with a slightly tongue in cheek because it probably annoys them.
You're the naughty major.
Yeah, the naughty major, major crime.
So tell us what was actually in the documents. What inspired you or catalyzed you to actually say, you know what, this information needs to come out? What kind of actions did they depict?
Well, there's a lot of them. It's more it does show that what I was talking about before. The Defence Forces bullshit is full of shit. We cover some crimes up, some things that are clearly crimes, we sweep under the carpet.
We're talking about
murders,
alleged murders of civilian Afghanis, and a fair few of them.
Yeah, a lot.
According to the Four Corners Killing Fields documentary or investigative journalism piece, you actually see the first person body cam footage, and it looks like cold-blooded murder of civilians. So was that sort of thing represented in these documents?
Yeah, that happened to be the unlucky soldier, happened to be recorded on quite a few of them would have been recorded on body cam, but that body cam happened to resurface. But yeah, that would be exactly like all the other cases. In fact, some of them were even worse because there'd be someone handcuffed. Once there was one situation where there was 10 people, onion farmers, they called the onion farmer ones, where they shot some Taliban, and then there was this group of people who were clearly onion farmers or something, and then someone thought that might be witnesses or something, and they just shot them all.
Wow.
And that's a pretty bad one.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is documented by whom? Who's actually scribing these documents?
We never checked anything, Sometimes the same weapon would be planted on a dead body.
Is that called a throwdown?
A throwdown, and it would have covered masking tape, brightly coloured masking tape, and the same one. And you wouldn't expect, people, not everyone's going to notice that, but it's checked. Those kind of things are checked. Like that weapon is meant to go through an armourer who looks at it and takes down radio. Yeah. So someone relatively responsible knows. And sometimes we don't have a throwdown, so radio the fucking helicopter, bring a throwdown. Now 20 people know then, and
Wow.
They all tell their best friend. That is bad. And okay, that no one ever got caught out for a throwdown. But in my time, what started me on this was not like, oh my God, war crimes, but I think that the press heard about it. I think maybe the International Criminal Court was hearing about it. And then they wanted scapegoats. Find us anybody. And in 2013, when I was there on the ground, they were trying to put anybody, people who had just defended themselves, and the absolute opposite. So they were letting all these fuckwits go free. But then people who's good soldiers who had actually just shot someone, who was trying to get their wife out there. And there was a witness, and it all made sense. No throwdown. Someone who does, that's what really annoyed me. Someone who doesn't use a throwdown and just tells it like it is and says, this is what happened. I thought my life was in danger. They want put him in jail for murder. But they're letting the throwdown guy who's reused the weapon 5 times, they're not even going to check on it because it was all the political bullshit. And that's what I said, look, enough's enough. And the guy who they were trying to put in jail unfairly, he was looking at me and saying, well, isn't it your job to do something about this? And at first I was quite defensive, but I thought, yeah, it is my job, actually. It's exactly my job to try to do something about this.
Well, it's the oath.
It's the oath. It's the oath, exactly. And I took that oath seriously. And I write about that in my book to say, yeah, some people, laugh about it. It might not be, maybe I was the only one that got the memo. But when I swore in front of the Australian flag to say, basically, you're going to give your life for this country. That's not the words you say, but that can only be the meaning. I took it seriously, yeah, and I can't understand why anyone wouldn't. If you don't want to give your life for your country, it's the wrong job for you. Go and work in the mines and
become a journalist. Some of the atrocities that were committed, certain acts that I've read about, including one of the SAS troops who severed the hands off these deceased Afghani civilians in order to fulfill the obligation to fingerprint the deceased.
Yeah, no, well, that I think was a beat up. Again, the only reason they cared about that was because the press found out. And the press found out, so the minister was like, oh my God. The Afghans didn't really care. I mean, the guy was dead. He had 3 big holes in him, and there was a decent reason. They were in a very dangerous territory. They had to get out of there fast. And the guy's a corporal. I mean, they tried to blame him and say, oh, mate, he should have used better judgment. Corporals don't use judgment.
They use scalpels in this case.
They use scalpels. They take orders. They get results. He needs to bring the thing. He brings it back. The Afghans didn't even notice because the guy was dead. They chucked him in the grave and he was in Taliban. They didn't care. Because it was on the ABC, it became this huge thing and everyone had to care and everyone was talking about it. At the same time as that, when they made it, this is how bad it was. The same when they were going on about that in 2013, there was at least the 39 murders in 2012. It would be a conservative, because the Brereton report was high. It was a meticulous. He's a very meticulous guy.
So tell us about that. From the outcome of your leak and the subsequent media coverage resulted in the Brereton report.
I think so. I think in a roundabout kind of way. I mean, they thought there's this guy McBride. He's talking. He's saying, well, he's saying it's all bullshit or whatever. And I think it just blames the soldiers. It says no one above Sergeant knew anything. People don't really believe that, but at least it was good because at least it established that the narrative was largely a lie, that everything was going tickety-boo. You might not have been convicted in court. They're not going to put them in jail. But those 39 were murdered. They're murders. And there was probably double that.
Wow.
There would be at least, maybe triple. I mean, these are just the ones that they were able to piece together because enough witnesses came forward or whatever. So you can imagine over like a 5-year period how many fog of war or straight. And that's what he said. None of these were fog of war.
Can you explain the concept of fog of war?
Well, the idea that you're doing a dangerous patrol in a dangerous area, you know that there's bad guys from the intelligence reports, and you see a guy on the hill who's holding a shovel against the skyline, could be a weapon, you shoot him.
As they say in the Four Corners expose, should I drop this cunt? Should I drop this cunt? Fade to black, toot, 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 guy's dead.
Well, that's not fog of war.
I'm just playing, which I probably shouldn't do for such a salacious fucking
no, it's fine.
Saga.
Soldiers have a lot of black humor, but so that is fine. But yeah.
What was the response from the military?
I don't know, but it was obviously very embarrassing. It was very embarrassing because shockwaves in that, in all sorts of levels. I mean, everyone said that no senior officers could be blamed, and I think a lot of people in the military are like, really, does that even make sense? Because the whole point of the military is the people at the top
Chain of
take.
command.
Yeah, exactly. You
Mm.
take the fall, you take the credit when things go well, but you also have to take the responsibility when they don't. It doesn't matter whether you knew. And the rule is, we hung a Japanese general on the ruling things you should have known or ought to have known, and I mean, or should have known or knew, and that was good enough. It didn't matter whether this guy knew nothing about. We hung him. He didn't say, I don't know anything about the war crimes, and he didn't, but we killed him anyway. And yet we don't judge our own people because they're protected because they're too close to the politics. That's the problem with being close to the politicians. Politicians protect the generals, generals protect the politicians. And that's not fair. We can't smash the corporals and let the politicians get away with a different standard.
Unbelievable. So, I'm interested to know what kind of protections you'd like for whistleblowers.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a misnomer, whistleblower protection, because most of us don't want protection. I don't want protection. I want accountability. I want to see David Hurley in the witness box.
Ouch.
Yeah, I want to see his head on a stake, really. But
Who's the Governor General currently?
Yeah, but to say you need to answer questions about, I believe you've committed treason. I believe that you haven't, you have put yourself above the interests of the nation, on all sorts of levels, and that is treason. And I want to see them answer questions. I do want to go back to the defence. I don't want my old job back without.
You're never getting that job back.
You never. I've still got the uniform. I keep it in the cupboard when I'll get the call. But without something being done, they'd put me on a managed return before I became a whistleblower, and they were chasing me $50 cab charges, which were kind of authorised, whatever. It was clear it was done in a cab, but they still want the receipt or whatever. And yet I'd be like, well,
Wow.
what about all these things, these
Wow.
these huge things that I've talked to you that you haven't, you've just fobbed me off about them. But that's Australia for you. We'll Peter Slipper, we put people in jail for, ruin their career over cab charges. Yet
Yeah.
there's huge amounts of corruption going on, and we don't even look
There's
at
a bureaucrat behind that who's got what David Graeber coined a bullshit job. Whose whole existence is contingent on that kind of paperwork.
Yeah.
And meaningless kind of paper pushing tasks.
Yeah. And that's the most important thing.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got your receipts.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you've blown, you've totally failed the country on in every other way. As long as you've got your cab receipts, everything's going to be okay. And that's the sort of country we're becoming,
Yeah. And so do you think there's a better way to investigate these alleged atrocities?
Well, the best way is to not do it in the first place. And we have to have better people at the top. We're allowed to kill people. And, if you send people to war, 100,000 soldiers, people are going to die. That doesn't mean we don't care about them. But these were symptoms of a very broken system rather than, the problems themselves. And what I would like to see is truth in the way the Defence Force is run. The Defence Force be able to say no, Minister. And we are no longer be some sort of political advertising firm where we just do stuff because the minister wants a good news story, bad news story, and we actually protect the country. That wouldn't be that hard to do. It would just involve not allowing the minister to sort of hire and fire people according to whether they're yes men or not. And we saw it in Robodebt. And that revealed more about the Defence Force, ironically, than anything else, because it showed you how a real government department works.
Absolutely.
And everybody just makes shit up,
Yeah.
and they do whatever the minister wants. And they've got this crappy idea, but the minister loves it. And even though the minister's
Massive budgets.
even though the minister's creep, that doesn't matter because the minister's going to promote you. So everyone gets into a frenzy and promoted this thing. And now they're all like, oh, I didn't know. But it's clearly they were all pushing it because it was bashing the elbow joint, and that was great, and that made them look good, and no one cared whether it was illegal. And thank God Catherine Campbell's, had head on a plate, because that is how the government departments are run. Everyone goes into a feeding frenzy when they get some stupid political thing, stopping the votes, bashing the dole voters or whatever. The only time a lawyer is ever called is to make sure that they can cover their tracks. They're not really trying to work out whether something's legal.
Yeah. I want to talk about the nature of warfare and combat and the culture within the Australian military. Presumably, it's quite desensitized when you hear about, I mean, particularly for the SAS, who's quite a secretive organization. When you hear about these, excuse the dog, when you hear about these, let's just have a pause.
Saved by the dog.
This concept of warrior culture, because to me it seems like you're the warrior in all of this.
No, I love hearing that, and I don't even mind the word. Again, it's a bit of an ABC misnomer. I mean, of course, there's going to have a warrior culture. I mean, what else are they going to have? Knitting culture, ballet culture,
Chatting culture.
I mean, they're soldiers. The warrior is people who go to war. So what are they going? But maybe it was a misnomer in that it was psychopathic culture. I mean, you don't need a psychopath or a bloodlust.
Yeah.
You know what? Some of the things that Ben Robert Smith said were, like I want to strangle the guy and watch the life come out of his eyes.
Can you just tell
That's
us about
pretty
his
dark.
story? Just repeat his name again for us. And
Ben
tell us
Robert Smith.
Yeah.
I don't want you to get sued or anything.
We can safely say he's the most decorated living soldier in Australia. He's got his enshrined in the War Memorial in Canberra.
It's quite damning, isn't it?
He's got his military outfit in a glass cabinet, and now they've added to it information about his
to say this is a controversial
alleged atrocities.
I know, it's pretty funny. I don't begrudge him that. Enough people now know the truth, and so we'll let it rest. But it's interesting. The tangential stuff that came out, I found far more interesting than the.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think was really damning was the idea that he wasn't even on the top of the short list for the VC, but the people I was talking about, the minister's PR people elevated him because he was so good looking.
And VC is?
Oh, sorry, the Victoria Cross, the equivalent of him, Congressional Medal of Honor for those in the US who might be watching this. But yeah, they elevated him because he was so good for media, and he was good for media because he helped popularise and sell the war. You can see now, even people just fall in love with him. Like, man, even now he's still got 25,000 followers. People, if you're still in love with Ben Roberts, I'm going to say you've got a bit of a man crush because you need to get over it. He would never been convicted by a jury trial because people just fall in love with him.
Let's not broach the topic of homosexuality in the military. It seems like an American kind of issue.
Don't ask, don't tell. That was their policy, wasn't it?
I mean, what's interesting about him is the defamation case. Can you talk about that?
Well, it was one of the greatest
without defaming him. We don't want to do that. If you're watching,
well, I'll just try to stick to the facts. Yeah, the papers. The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald and the Canberra Times, they ran stories about alleging that he was a war criminal, a murderer, wife beater, and he denied it and he sued them. And because he's a famous public speaker, and and he was in fact running a television station by that, I guess.
He was running Channel 7 Brisbane,
major,
and in fact, his legal. It wasn't a defence, was it? He was the one suing for defamation.
Yeah.
His legal case was funded by Kerry Stokes, the owner of the Seven Network.
Yeah, who obviously is totally besotted with him. And because even his own ex-wife gave evidence against him. So I guess part of this personality, you believe your own stuff. I guess if you're the chairman or whatever he was, managing director of Channel 7, you feel some Joe Blow might have done it, but you feel like I'm an important person. How dare they say that about me? But yeah, it must be one of the greatest own goals in history because there was just allegations in the newspaper. But by the time the thing finished, 5 years later, I don't think anyone who followed the case thought anything other than, unless you're a complete idiot and believed it was all great conspiracy, that you would think anything other than the fact that the allegations were basically all true.
It's the Streisand effect.
Yeah. I mean, now everybody knows, and what people forget is that some people, they don't even know, they don't want to know because they're so in love with him. But the key witnesses, well, I'm going to say that I'm going to shame them because you'd have to be.
Oh, he's a strapping-looking dude with an Instagram following and decorated soldier.
The evidence was so clear.
Businessman.
If you're still sort of like, oh my God, I can't believe it, you're in love. You're in love. Get over it. The most damning and strong evidence given again was not journalists. It wasn't sort of peace lovers or even Afghans. It was other SAS soldiers, every bit as brave, every bit as just done selection, done, lots of tours of Afghanistan. Some of them are still in. They were the ones that said he crossed the line.
Crazy.
I thought one really good quote was from one of them that said, he doesn't admit it, of course, because that would be a crime, but he basically says, look, we all push the envelope over there. We're not peaceniks. We're not in this job for nothing. But he went too far. And that was a good, that was a stiff upper lipped soldier's thing saying, I'm not a squeamish. I'm not worried about pulling the trigger.
You can't have pussies defending the country.
Yeah, exactly. But he clearly, what he did was, it wasn't defending the country. It was some sort of bit of psychopathic. It was, the evidence, some of the evidence was like, he told me he wanted, Ven Robert Smith said, I wanted to strangle an Afghan child and watch the life force pass out of his eyes. And there was one time that was pretty much proved. And there were probably 100 times when he said something like that, which wasn't able to be proved in court, It's pretty nuts stuff. It's not something that you would let babysit your children.
Sounds like an apex troop. Sounds like great military training. Sorry.
Well, I think, and this is one of the
It sounds totally sadistic.
Because there is a lot of right sympathy and empathy with Australians for the people who put their lives on the line for us. And if his defence had been, I was out there, basically you can't handle the truth. It's tough out there. I had the responsibility to keep my boys alive. I don't want to go back to Perth and have to sell Johnny's wife that is dead, and because I wasn't tough enough. So I pushed the barrow. I was trying to keep people alive, and you try and do it. It's pretty hard. If he'd come back and said that, he would have been a hero. People would have said, yeah. But because he came back and said, I've never, ever done anything wrong, and it's a huge conspiracy by Joe, I think that's when it blew up, because he could have said, look, we all make mistakes. There are times I was angry and pissed off. He really claimed the moral high ground. He said, and the barristers did what they say. Closed the gates. They said, you understand the rules of engagement. You're not confused by them or anything. And he's like, yep, I totally understand. Don't be so stupid. Of course, I know the rules of engagement. He's adopted his alternate persona is one of, I can't believe I'm even being put through this by this terrible conspiracy theories. He thinks he's the Punisher or something, and it's like all like, of course I would never hit a woman. And it just, and it's believable. He's a very good, I have to say, he came across so well if you just judge body language and whatever, but the facts of the matter just did not fit with his story.
So a bit of a poor PR strategy, but executed really well.
Yeah, exactly.
To speak, to use the term execution.
It sums up the Australian military, a bad plan, but professional execution.
Over-delivered. And of course, the sum total of the whole defamation case was it got dismissed. So he lost.
Yeah, it got dismissed, which of course means it got dismissed with findings of fact to say, I can only dismiss this because I find that on balance, you are a murderer. And even there's sort of things like contextual truth to say, well, you might not have bashed the woman, but since you've killed, I'm satisfied you've blown away a whole lot of children and you've done this and you've done that. It doesn't really matter whether you bash or not. It was, if you read it, it was a meticulous takedown. You couldn't read a more harsh takedown of a person's character than reading that Bosenko's judgment, because it's really lengthy. Wow. But he goes through every single thing and says, basically, I'm satisfied that it happened. And credit to the lawyers, a guy called Adam Owens, who was only just promoted senior counsel, but he did a masterful job, and also Masters and Mackenzie, and because it would have been quite stressful for them, thinking it's all going to fall apart, because it could have, if as you know, you've been on the recipient. The court is a bit of a football game, and even
It's a
though
theatre.
it's a theatre, and even though the papers had, the facts on their side, it could have easily just fallen apart
Oh,
on
it's
the
not.
drop of a dice.
It's not factual.
One key witness to sort of change, and then all the others would have got scared to say, "Fuck, we're going to lose. I'm going to get sick that day," or because there's a lot of pressure on the witnesses. Yeah, so once people start to think I'm on the losing side,
Yeah.
these guys, or you just lose confidence.
Yeah.
It's one of the witnesses said, I'm happy to give evidence in a criminal trial, but I don't really want to be fighting one media company against another, putting my life on the line.
You don't want to get threatened by Ben.
Yeah, by two media, two unlikable media companies, Channel 7 versus Channel 9.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found quite disappointing was that Channel 9 were, despite all this sort of like, oh, we are the truth matters to us and we'll fight the end, that they were looking to, they were considering settling it, and they just would have walked away if the price had been right, which I think is kind of, I guess that's the real world, but it's not quite fighting for truth at any cost when you're saying, well, maybe we'll just walk away. But anyway, they didn't, and credit to them. If they'd lost, if they'd gone down, that could have, without exaggeration, been the end of investigative journalism in Australia. It was an incredibly strong story, which matters to Australia, with fantastic witnesses, with huge amount of our two most famous, most decorated journalists, and the might of Channel 9. If they had gone down, what other story would anyone ever run? And that would have been a terrible, whatever you think of Robert Smith, that would have been a terrible, terrible thing to happen to Australia. Yeah, because it would mean that it would mean not just the death of journalism, but the death of truth.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's no more stark representation of the death of truth quite often than in the courtroom. It just seems to me to be, again, quite a theatrical event. I mean,
it's not about the truth.
It's not about the truth, no. It's about who's got the money, who's got the professional hubris, quite often.
Yeah,
I mean, look, in my case, I remember the DPPs. This is in the magistrates' court, where, just to reiterate, it was a huge raft of charges and the spectre of 42 years in jail for medical cannabis and psychedelics related to the kind of fringe of psychedelic research at the time. But anyway, I remember the guy from the DPP wheeling in this stack of documents, and that was all his cases for the day. And then my guy sort of walked in like king shit, because he was. And there was this bench of lawyers and barristers. Yeah. And I feel like these legal professionals don't want to look soft. They want to represent their client, whether they believe in the truth of the matter or not. In many ways, lawyers, which I believe constitutes about 75% of the Australian Parliament, are professional bullshit artists.
They are.
So, I'm sorry.
No, and it's true. That's absolutely true. And they can go from prosecuting. The girl I was with today, Eddie, made me laugh because she was very much on side, and yet, and is helping me with game plans, whatever. But she did some trial cross examinations against me, like what she would say if she was the prosecutor. And it was very effective and quite good about how, so you always get taken out of context, so you, Mr. McBride.
Yeah.
And it shows you we are quite happy. We'll kill you, we'll fix you. It doesn't matter to us. And you're right, it's a pretty embarrassing, the fact that most people in Parliament are lawyers. The only people worse are real estate agents, I think. It's pretty close.
I mean, just back to that analogy quickly about it being a theatre, I really found like I was the lead actor, my barrister was the director, the critic was the magistrate, or in your case, the judge.
I love it.
Oh my gosh.
That's a good attitude to have.
It's a metaphor you can keep extending. Yeah, that'll be in my book too when it comes out, by the way. In fact, give your book a plug. Do you have a title?
The Nature of Honour. It talks about the idea, as we discussed, with that hand, cutting off the hand case, as opposed to sort of blowing away children, that sometimes you have to defend some soldiers and sometimes you have to prosecute them. And oftentimes where that line is drawn is not clear, but it needs to be clear in your own mind to say, I'm going to go this person, I'm going to stand up for this, for whatever, or I'm going to defend this person. At the end of the day, it's only yourself that you really answer to, and you have to be aware that a lot of people are never going to like your decisions. But it's pretty funny. It goes back to my convict ancestors. I start off with the premise to say, if my life's going to end with a trial, it's interesting. My time in Australia began with a trial, and I go back to my convict, and quite funny. They didn't steal a loaf of bread. They were professional criminals. He's even got a few phony alibi witnesses who get caught out, and he marries another convict, and then and it talks about the rise of, my father was the first person, to go to university in his family. My mother was the first person to go to university in her family. They got scholarships. So we were they were
breaking the cycle.
Yeah, but nouveau riche kind of thing. Yeah, breaking the cycle. They suddenly became well-to-do. They were doctors. They bought Mercedes cars, and we lived in much bigger houses than our grandparents did, sort of thing. So it was a sort of rags to riches story, and then my father had his downfall, and it'll be a fantastic finish if I go to jail. I mean, it's certainly snakes and ladders, because there is a fair bit of good stuff in the story. Yeah.
Now, actually, I should mention that, and hopefully this gives you some hope, even though our cases are markedly different. I mean, yours is in the federal court.
Supreme Court of the ACT.
I beg your pardon, Supreme Court, yeah. Which is far more serious than the district court I was in. But, after facing 42 years in jail, I ended up with no criminal record. Section 10, baby. And that's through my own narrative, which I won't get into here. It's not the time or the place.
No, but that is good to know.
It's good to know.
And it's worth
hope.
saying it, because it does make me feel there is hope.
Yeah, good.
You pled guilty, and that makes you more likable, or did you?
I pled not guilty to begin with. At the start, my barrister said, what do you want to do? Guilty or not guilty? I said, fuck it, let's get this over with. Guilty. Right. I was totally over it. I was ready to go to jail,
You get
man.
like that. I mean, I was like that 5 years ago. I was representing myself. I had no money. And I was like, I'm just going to go in there. I'm going to tell my story and fucking let the cards fall as they may. Yeah, because you're tired. You're really tired.
Yeah, they wear you down.
Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't until people came to me and said, look, we'll give you money, and we started raising money, and you only got professional people in. But I can understand that you would just say,
yeah. My barrister said, that's the fucking dumbest move I've ever heard of, mate. not guilty. You got to defend yourself. I was like, oh yeah, shit. Well, because, in my heart, I knew I didn't do anything morally wrong at all. I mean, I was helping terminally ill patients with cannabis and never actually distributed it personally, but connected people, and that was just a matter of being public, having a film that was all over the internet at the time. Yeah, so...
But that's the irony, is the people like you and me, because you're like, oh, you're guilty. Even though you might not have done anything morally wrong, because that's you're answering to your own conscience, and you say, yeah, well, if the state says I'm guilty, well, fucking maybe I am, but I don't feel that way. But
my conscience is so clear.
The professional criminal, like the people I've got my license back now, people I've represented are people like, they're caught with a bag full of masses of drugs and $10,000 in the console of their car, and they're like, not mine. I don't know where it was.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Not guilty to everything. Yeah, I don't know how it got in my car.
Well, the law actually makes concession for all this sort of stuff. Like, I tried to ingratiate the cops a bit to myself, and I didn't actually want my girlfriend at the time to get in trouble. So I started kind of admitting to things, or it's a legal concept of how conclusively linked the evidence is to you. Yeah. So they kept asking me, what's this particular compound they found a giant bag of? And after time, I got sort of sick of it. I'm like, look, we all know it's alphabetamine, let's just say, let's just not get into the actual stuff here. But basically, by doing that, by admitting that I knew what the compound they found was, or if, for instance, I'd pointed out where something is, and they keep asking, is there anything in the house that there shouldn't be? If I had have been stupid enough to go, yeah, sure, over there, then I've linked myself to that evidence, right? But they can find something even with a receptacle containing cannabis or something with your fingerprints on it. If it's in a common area of the house, unless you admit something to it or conclusively link yourself to the evidence,
not necessarily, yeah.
They can't really stick it to you.
Yeah, that's what I got. It's pretty funny, isn't it? No, it's true.
It's crazy.
And there's a famous case about it. All law students remember it because they think it's so kind of funny, where the guy got caught with the bag of heroin in his house or something, but because it was some sort of shared house,
Yeah.
You get so even though it's pretty clear that it was him, but yeah,
It's a plausible defense.
yeah, I know. So
And look, it makes sense when you really think about it.
well, when you're putting people in jail for a very long time, I think it's a lot of our criminal law is medieval in the sense that it's based on that principle that better 10 people go free than one person go to jail. And so yeah, and in the old days when they used to hang people, and you better get it right. And I think that I think it's probably getting abused a bit by professional criminals these days. And I must admit, I prefer running guilty pleas like your guy eventually did. Maybe you've got to wear them down, but the idea that someone like that, someone who's really caught, I had a guy he'd been in jail all his life recently, and then he'd been out for a couple of weeks, and they committed this sort of botched robbery on an IGA, and they got arrested half an hour later. I'm not really interested in running some sort of not guilty plea on that.
Yeah.
It's just like
There's limits to it.
there's a limit, and you'd say, you'd be better off. And again, you'd be better off to say, I've got a drug problem, as this guy did. I've got an ice problem. I want to get to drug court. I need rehab, and working on getting him rehab. The last thing you want is to be. If you're a bad criminal, you don't want to keep doing it and going in and out of jail.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very unique case in the sense that, look, for my barrister, he loved it. I was one of several clients at the time. Other clients included a fellow who imported half a ton of meth, and he was trying to get him 25 years instead of life imprisonment.
Yeah, half a ton. It's pretty big.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And all sorts of other nefarious characters. And there I was with my feature film, which was 84 minutes of evidence showing the scene I was involved in. So the film was filmed from 2010 to 2014 and depicted the provision of cannabis to terminally ill patients. I filmed in New South Wales Parliament, all manner of academics and people involved. So
this wasn't Marijuana Australiana.
that's my film.
That's the same one. Yeah.
That's the film, yeah. And which they screened in the district court, the court cut. So I took out the funny shit. I took out the section about Nimbin and things like this. And that was quite interesting. I left the 7-meter tall sativas in there at the behest of my amazing barrister. He said, no, it shows where the stuff came from, mate. So I knew the dial had moved when the DPP lawyer, and I think I went through 4 of them by the end of it.
But that's what I've done. I've worn them out.
The dial changes based on their sentiments. It's very weird. I was up on the stand, ran through some questions with the barrister, had an all-star cast there of my genius academic friends, and my mate who runs Prism, everything from anthropologists to documentarians and so on. Just my mates came to support me. And then the DPP guy got up when he was called to ask me questions, and he said, I have no questions, Your Honour. And I was like, that doesn't seem at all orthodox. Like, why am I not getting grilled from this guy about all and sundry? And as he sat down, he kicked over the waste paper basket at his feet. And I thought he just kicked the bucket. Like, there's a metaphor for the prosecution. The magistrate took his time to deliberate, which was really punishing, and eventually came back with the Section 10 some weeks later and read through it.
Some weeks?
It was, I think, 2 weeks later, and he sat there reading a 12-page
that is punishing
summary, and I was bawling my eyes out.
I've got a theory: is if they start slating you at the beginning, you're going to go well, and if they start saying you're a nice bloke at the beginning, you're going to jail.
Do you know what I think it was?
They always turn around.
Yeah, I think you're right. Look, I was told at the Downing Centre there in Sydney, it's kind of like a round robin. They'll pick a magistrate out of 50 who are available, and on my second last appearance in court, which was the big day, I had the all-star cast there ready to support me and all this stuff. We drew this magistrate who was a serious piece of work. I watched him commit a woman I think she was found with 9 MDMA pills in a club, and he threw her in jail. And my barrister said, you're fucked with this guy. You're going to jail. So he found some legal move to adjourn the case one final time. I think he requested a pre-sentence report, something like this, which was a fucking ordeal in itself in the end. But then just luckily I got the magistrate on the final day in court, the 12th appearance, who was responsible for paying compensation to the James Hardy mesothelioma victims. And he made note of that in the sentencing. He made note of that in his final report. And he was basically saying, Richard Barron's a fucking angel. And like, I mean, I had, a woman whose son had Dravet syndrome, severe infant epilepsy. And
The magistrate was
yeah,
involved in the Hardy case,
yeah, he
and
was the guy.
you'd been helping victims.
So he made a big point that
There's
he
got to
was
be
a
some sort of
benevolent
God.
magistrate.
There's got
Yeah,
to be
look,
some sort of God. Yeah.
some kind. If you're spiritually inclined, there was definitely some guardian angels. And like, quite frankly, I was deeply involved in the ayahuasca drinking community, and like I said, psychedelic therapy and research, which was very nascent at the time. It certainly was spearheaded by prism.org.au, who were responsible for much of the legalization and the law reform that's happened around these compounds. So I had a lot of tools to work with to deal with the fact that I'd fucked my life up, or my life was being fucked up for me, and I was going to jail, and I'm dragging my family through the courts and all this sort of stuff. So I found that very interesting. And every time I'd go drink ayahuasca, I had to go report to the cops. I'd have to go to court to get the weekend off reporting to the cops. I had to report to Surrey Hills Police Station every single day. And I got urine tested for a year and a half and all the rest of it, forfeited my passport, etc. They made me live with my parents. That was part of the bail conditions. You naughty little boy exploring consciousness and healing yourself. You go live with
Would
your
you
parents.
say you were allowed to do ayahuasca or something?
No, it's illegal. But I did it to deal with my shit, and it helped immensely. And every time I do it, like I literally remember, go and have a drink with this.
So you got personal experience that it helped you with your.
Oh, absolutely. It helped me with my burgeoning PTSD and the ramifications. It basically fast-tracked my understanding of the situation. And I took this stoic mentality that there was some stuff that was just completely out of my control. And certainly when I was sitting there tripping dick, I wasn't going to change anything in the time. So there's no point in stressing about it. Having said all of that, yeah, it was really interesting. Every time I'd embark upon one of these journeys, and because I realized when they were piss testing me, they didn't test for mescaline, didn't test for DMT. They tested for all the boring street drugs, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, cool, this is what I have to amp up a bit in order to deal with my shit. And yeah, I'd get like a phone call from the barrister saying, mate, I don't know what's happened, but it's your lucky fucking day. They've dropped the mushrooms charge that came back as having no illegal substance in it. Or it was like a massive chess game with like a decision branch.
How many years did you say again?
I was in court for a year and a half.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then 2-year good behaviour bond. But yeah, it was a huge ordeal. Like every single move you make, it opens up a whole other branch of possibilities, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
And so I played the game. And I can tell you, if you ever do fall afoul of the law, it's different for you. But with drugs cases, don't really necessarily go in there with the strategy of being a social justice warrior. Don't tell them the laws are wrong or whatever. Play the game. Remorse and contrition. The concept of contrition, it's one of these legalese terms that you never hear outside the legal circle. But basically get up there and say, I'm sorry, I'm a bad boy. I only did it once, never do it again. This is all completely not official legal advice, but I tell you what,
you have to meet it. Children, you have to meet it. I'm telling you.
That's what they want to hear, right? That's what they want to hear. And then what's crazy in my case is a short time thereafter, they changed the drug laws, at least for medical cannabis, and then half the activities that I was involved in are completely hunky-dory. And now, of course, there's a multi-billion-dollar industry around it. So it's interesting. The courts move, the legal system moves slowly to reflect social perceptions. Yeah.
So you don't want to be that last person to be convicted before things change. Yeah.
That's right. And so tell me about the support you've received.
There's a lot of really good people in Australia.
Got MPs supporting your case?
Shoebridge, quite a few. There's a mob of them, actually. I don't have time to thank them. Andrew Wilkie, who was a whistleblower against the Gulf War. Monique Ryan, Sophie Scamps, Allegra Spender, my local member. It's pretty good, actually. Yeah, now that and it's nice, even when I say their names, it makes me feel Kylie Tink. It makes me feel pretty happy, actually. It won't guarantee you won't go to jail, but it means you won't be forgotten. I think that's important.
Yeah.
The way to make change in the drug legislation, you're part of it. You're part of that wave of change. Is that maybe someone has to make a sacrifice. Maybe going to jail will make the change.
Yeah.
As we discussed, the worst thing that could happen is they just drop the charges and then sweep it on the carpet. Nothing ever happens.
And in fact, clogging up the courts with more charges is a strategy that's been conveyed to me as possibly something that would work from fairly zealous cannabis activists. And I thought, if you want to go down that path, it's a fucking ordeal. You want to avoid the legal system if possible. because it's costly and it's a huge
I
time
quite
vortex?
like it. I see where they're coming from. I've often
Your mileage may vary, yeah.
I just say your mileage may vary. I just suddenly got that.
Sorry.
But no, I love it. But to
Well, you
say,
seem to want to be combative. You seem to want to take this to
well, to
court.
say
You
to
want to go
people,
to trial.
if more people, a bit like networking, I can't handle anymore. Tell everyone that works in the public service, go and take your secret documents and give them to journalists. Now they won't publish them all, of course, but the police will not have enough resources to arrest everybody.
Yeah, and the judges will get the shits, the magistrates will get the shits.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's happened with
So to say we need
aspects of
to
the drug
change it.
law.
Yeah, well, that's right. You imagine a magistrate now having to sentence someone on cannabis. I
Yeah.
mean, it would just be, it's so ridiculous that we have this completely a nonsensical distinction between a state border and, you know, about whether or not it's legal. It's totally legal, isn't it, in the ACT and not in New South Wales or wherever.
Oh man, it's wild, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's obviously, it's a bit like a ink blot. It's going to soak into the rest. And maybe from there, they will move on to other drugs. Because you could say if all the boogeymen about, oh, you can't legalize cannabis, it's, the world's going to fall apart. But if they can actually do it.
Well, now the doctors are the dealers. Yeah, I get it sent in the mail, totally legally. I'm legally allowed to have, you know, my parents freaked out about that a bit when I put on the family WhatsApp my prescription of high grade, 22% OG Kush.
Is it rolled? How does it come?
It comes as, you can get whatever you want. It's like an eBay of cannabis. You can buy hash, you can get tincture, you can buy gummy bears, I think, and all manner of flour. So it comes to me as flour. I get 10 grams a pop, and you can have 3 products at once. So you get roughly 30 grams. It's basically an ounce a pot each time, and you get 5 repeats. So this is the company I go through, who I won't name, but it's easy. It's all telehealth since COVID. Literally, it was a 20-minute chat with the nurse, and half of that was her just wanting to have a chat. And then the doctor who did the follow-up call, and it took not even 5 minutes, because I'm in a rural location up here in the Northern Rivers. The call dropped about a minute into it, and I get an email from them, the buy now link. He's just, while the call's dropped, he sent me buy the cannabis, which I did. I dropped like $550 and all this weed. I was like, sweet. I sit on my arse and they deliver it to me via Australia Post. And then he rings me up. Yeah, great. Oh, just by the way, you've never had any psychosis or anything? I'm like, no, I've had PTSD like a motherfucker. I've already bought it. And then he's like, oh, and by the way, well, the nurse had covered some of this already, but he just, for some reason, I feel the doctor had to clarify. And the whole conversation with the actual doctor was about 3 minutes. And then, a few days later, I get some cannabis in the mail, and that was it. Huge for me. It was such a spin out.
Oh, that's good. It's fantastic. But why not? I mean, they know as long as you're not mixing it with other drugs, it's pretty harmless. You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And so good on them for being grown up and not buying into the scare campaign.
It's a whole other conversation, which I'm sure I'll cover on this channel and this podcast at length in the future. But I wanted to sort of turn the conversation a little bit to PTSD. I mean, I probably have complex PTSD, largely dealt with, but I've been through some shit as you have and as you currently are going through. So I wanted to ask about how many military personnel you find experiencing PTSD, and talk about your own experiences to the level you're comfortable with, please.
It's a serious subject, and I've got to be careful not to say anything sort of flippant, get people angry. I think there's a large incidence in the military of something called moral injury. They're so angry about their organization, as I am. I don't think I have PTSD in the it'd be grouped under the PTSD umbrella, but it's really moral injury, which is when you're so angry about the chief of in your opinion, the chief of defence force, committing treason, or everything that you were meant to be standing for to be a lie, or the government totally misusing the defence force.
Existential injury, perhaps.
Yeah. But it'd be like if you're a doctor, it's not totally fairy, and you've done all your learning or whatever, and you find out the hospital you work in, they're killing patients. When you complain about it, they say, shut up, none of your business. It's what we do here to make money or something. I mean, you would just go, what the fuck? It would just damage you, and then you'll end up being charged. So yeah, it's all the pedophile priests. Imagine if you were working in Bendigo in the 70s as a priest or something, and you're like, hang on, it seems like some bad shit's going down. And they were like, you started to realize you're the only one, who wasn't, and then they started chasing you. I mean, it's when you see some terrible things and it's part of an institution, and then you suddenly become the bad guy and you become the enemy, and whatever, and the whole force of the government, in my case, is used against me. The attorney generals wouldn't help me. I wrote to them. I wrote to the cops. It becomes like a horror movie. They said, we don't, if the government wants to do it, it's not a crime, which is clearly wrong. But that's what they said, and if they say it, it's happening. And then they just like in a good horror movie, everywhere I went, they seem to be part of the problem. Now that can stuff you up. And I'm just getting through it now because the antidote to that is public support.
Yeah.
That's why I always have time for people like you and your viewers, because you can imagine when you're facing that nightmare. Yeah, suicide is probably one of the two things kept me alive was some sort of spiritual idea that I'm gonna win. I was gonna win, and that didn't look very likely 5 years ago. And the love of my children. I was very lucky. I'm divorced. I have a very good relationship with my ex-wife, and she never tried to cut me off from at all. Now, if she had done that, I don't know if I would have made it. I wasn't completely ostracized. I had a family, even if we weren't together. So that unconditional love, they never said it to me, but I guess they thought I was pretty nuts. But they never stopped giving me that unconditional love that they gave to Dad. So credit to them, that probably saved my life, and that was good for them. I identify with that sort of PTSD, and I was lucky in that I always had a mission. I always had a mission to do to basically out the bad guys. Now, whether that's misguided or not, it's certainly. I felt a bit like the lead character in like a Die Hard movie where he goes down the elevator. You get injured, burned, whatever. But if you're trying to carry out the mission, that's just that's just collateral damage. That's part of the job description. You're going to get a bit of bark off you. You would have possibly have something similar when you're experimenting with you got to get a bit of bark off you, and don't be such a pussy to worry about that. I knew that I was drinking a lot, using drugs, so having a lot of bad dreams and shit. But because I was focused on winning, I was prepared for that. I think one of the problems, people with moral injury who just get turfed out, and particularly people who are trying to get a payment from Department of Veterans Affairs, paid me pretty quickly because they didn't want to mess with me.
As in,
I think
TPI or something like that?
Yeah, well, they didn't get a .TPI, but I got a white card.
That's totally permanently incapacitated, by the way. Military pension for life.
Yeah, I got a pension, but they didn't really bother arguing with it. Oh, they just maybe they thought it would shut me up. But for people that argue or trying to get a pension, and then they feel that they've been, I'm not an expert on DVA, and DVA did quite a good job with me. But if you came to the view that they were stuffing you around purposely, and you'd given you so many years service for your country, and then this corporate body, like an insurance company, is saying you're not eligible for any fucking money, and you think they're lying, and they think that they're doing it deliberately. I mean, you're a serious suicide risk. Especially if you don't have a family anymore or whatever, because you'd be thinking, fuck, everybody is double crossing me. I've got nothing. And even though they're bullshit, the fact they're bullshitting makes them worse because they didn't have a mission. Their one mission is maybe to get paid. If they're not going to get paid, I mean, you would end your life. I think that moral injury, I think this is the case in the US. Last night when we had a video called Incident in New Baghdad, and it's about this guy who was there he was the soldier on the ground during that WikiLeaks Collateral murder, famous video. You could actually see him in the video picking up a not dead child, as it turns out. He had kind of moral injury too, because he said he came to the realization when he was there that day, and he worked out it was actually the Apache helicopter that killed everybody, not Iraqi insurgents, that he was like, what the fuck, I'm working for the bad guys,
Mm.
and I just want to survive. Now, I think there's a huge incident of that in the U.S. Army. They draft poor people,
Yeah,
green draft, and they're just so poor you've got
exactly.
no
It's
medical.
the only option.
The only option, if you want to go to university or whatever, you have to play Russian roulette with the U.S. Army or Marines in order to possibly get a better life. You have to spend 10 years risking your own life with the Russian roulette. So, and a lot of them, when they saw what was the Hollywood version is quite acceptable. We're going to go there to make the world a better place.
The Jerry Bruckheimer version. Top Gun.
But the Jerry Bruckheimer, you're right. Yeah, that's right.
Biggest war recruitment film of all time.
But the reality, these guys get there, and the Australian Army, there was a lot of problems, but we're relatively small, and compared to the US Army, whatever we did, it was pretty bad. Theirs is like a cowboy town, on steroids.
Yeah.
They're going nuts. There are a lot of people on the edge of mental illness with automatic weapons and fucking, pretty much anything was going.
What I was told is that when you're penetrating enemy territory, let's say you're in a bushland environment. In fact, I was up here at the Northern Rivers one time, and my mate was telling me this as we were looking out through the valley. He said the Australian Army guys would send out some recce's, and then the rest of the team would advance a little bit, and they just advance, whereas the Americans wake up in the morning and just spray the area and move in, completely alerting the enemies of their presence.
I saw a training film which I found very disturbing, as after I'd done my British SAS. And it was produced by the SEAL. They're meant to be the absolute experts about jungle war, the top of the top. They meant you do all this selection or whatever. And they were walking along, and they just stood there with those big kind of chain guns, and this is how we deal with jungle. And they just go
Rambo style.
Yeah, no one lying on the ground, just like and until there were no more trees. And you're like, that's how special forces are. Very sneaky. Yeah, fucking no one's going to fucking see that come. And they wouldn't have even hit anything. They just would have hit trees. And if the Viet Cong got down on the ground, it would have been fine.
The nature of warfare is really interesting. And I was talking to you earlier about Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman's book On Killing, where it talks about the nature of hand-to-hand combat. So back in the day, you'd have to sort of bayonet someone and, look into the eyes of the person whose life you're potentially taking. And I believe during the Vietnam War, he mentions in the book that they found more bullets lodged in the ground than were in people or trees or what have you, because so many of the military personnel weren't into what they were doing. But instead of, getting court-martialed or what have you for not acting, for not killing, they would pretend.
They were there to survive.
That's right.
That's like this guy said last night. He said after he saw that Collateral murder incident, he was just there to pass time to get home.
Yeah. And nowadays you've got the drone pilots in Nevada sitting in air-conditioned little bunkers while they nuke people halfway around the world.
Yeah, and that's gone wrong.
It's like a gamification.
Yeah, and there's a whistleblower on that, Daniel Hale, who said that's all right. There's nothing wrong with drone pilots in Jacksonville or whatever they are, but they have to know what they're doing, and they have to only try to kill legitimate targets. But Daniel Hale said they killing, I think he said 90% of the people who kill the innocents. That's damn, and they put him in jail. No, that's damning. That's damning. He was saying that there was no effort to actually kill the right people.
Yeah.
It was just like
indiscriminate.
That person's wearing a turban.
Yeah.
Fucking kill him.
Yeah.
And that is disgusting. Very low level sort of stuff. And so I think inside every man is a killer. I don't think it really fucking, as long as you're doing it for the right reason, as long as you're killing a bad dude, there's no problem at all. It's just like a video game. You don't care whether...
Or as long as you're killing it in whatever field, metaphorically speaking.
Well, if there's an enemy who's coming here to kill you, the Viking or whatever, and he's coming here to kill your family or whatever, you don't feel bad about it.
My pacifist tendencies would go right down the toilet if that were the case.
Yeah, well, it's not for everybody. That's true. It's an acquired taste, but it's when you lose that discipline. Bad government, bad leadership comes first.
Yeah,
and then they go psycho. It's not so much that they go psycho because was a bad thing or whatever. But if you've got an idiot in command and you've got an idiot, if you're in the invasion of Iraq, which was clearly based on, as it turns out, based on false intelligence and for all the wrong different reasons than they pretended they were there.
Yeah.
Most of the American generals were pretty idiotic. You're going to get everything going to go wrong on the ground, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not so much about killing being bad. It's just that if you've got people without any kind of moral compass or without any skill, everything you do is going to go wrong. This is just my opinion. I'm not trying to change yours in that regard, but I've grown up in the idea that, you know,
you're a trained killer, mate.
well, that's what I grew up on as well. I mean, and I still like to believe there'll be certain circumstances that unless we've been really conned, but you can go pretty hard. Unfortunately, that we don't fight wars like that anymore.
Yeah.
We fight and we don't have systems in place. Well, someone said to me, was it ever going to be successful in Afghanistan? At first I was thinking maybe, but the more I think about it, to think, no, you know, the idea that it's a myth that you can fight successful guerrilla warfare, you know.
Yeah.
You go to you invade a country, you either kill everybody and rebuild it, or you are never going to turn the population with guns. You're never going to make them little Americans.
You've got to get in with the local militia, right?
Yeah. Of course, we never, despite the American propaganda, I love it. I can't think of any successful suppression.
Yeah.
You know, in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, they're all disasters.
Yeah,
You're all
absolutely.
disasters.
Don't even mention the dirty wars.
The military-industrial complex keep doing them because they're profitable.
Absolutely.
They don't care whether we win or not.
Yeah, Halliburton loves that shit.
Halliburton loves it. Halliburton won. They won.
Absolutely.
They gave themselves a medal. They gave Dick Cheney a medal, Bronze Star for fantastic profits. And so I think that's one of the problems. I used to get angry and say, oh, don't they know they're not winning the war? I think they knew they couldn't care less. Yeah. They're winning the war because they're winning the profits war.
Yeah, there's contracts for doing the laundry for all these soldiers. There's contracts for supplying their food. There's
supplying their food.
All manner of ways
and
of
all
rebuilding.
Their friends, you know. And the contract might be for 100 million. It only costs them 50 million to fulfill it. They give 20 million back to George Bush, 20 million to Cheney, 20 million. The Democratic Party is to the cupboard, and everyone's happy, and the war goes on. I think Julian Assange was right to say they don't want to end the war. They want endless wars. And I wasn't even an Assange supporter when he said that, but I've come to see from a totally different direction that he was probably right.
So just to reflect back quickly on the nature of war, what struck me about particularly the Four Corners killing field footage is it seems pretty hand to hand. They're in close quarters to these civilians that they're allegedly nailing. It doesn't seem detached.
Yeah, it's pretty hand-to-hand. Like the very first thing you do when you get to basic training, well, pretty much, you know, once you run around the block and whatever, is your bayonet training, and you have to stick a big fuck-off blade into this bag of sand.
Did you twist it?
I can't remember. I think you have to twist it again because it sucks, and you don't have to twist it anymore because a modern bayonet has got a sort of a groove in it.
It's got a channel.
It's got a channel,
yeah.
which is very gruesome. You say, why they got the channel? So the air lets out, and so you can pull it out. And it's gruesome stuff. And that's why, and also that I got taught I did my basic training in the UK in 1988. And there were the guys that trained us had been in the Falklands. And they had bayoneted Argentine 19-year-old conscripts to death. And they were talking about it, saying, you got to have the right blade. These fucking blades, they kept breaking. I hit the breastbone of the Argentine and it fucking broke, you know. So they're fucking shit, you know. But they, first had experience about it. And they would tell you that the blades were not strong enough to take the smashing against the breastplate.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a grim business. And that's one of the reasons why you either cut it out, which wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, if we could stop the wars, whatever. But for people, you shouldn't try and pretend that that's not the reality. That's the reality. Unless you're prepared to put a bayonet through someone's eye, you've probably got no business being an infantry soldier, because it's not necessarily going to happen that often. But yeah, that's what you've got to be a butcher.
Yeah. And speaking about technologies like adding the groove to the bayonet, I mean, the military is responsible for so much technological development, including the internet and all manner of
And they're not doing it for any other reason
No.
but to kill.
Yeah.
Well, they've got a whole lot of stuff, electronic impulse or whatever to put out all the. I can hate to think of some of the weapon systems they've got on the shelf.
Oh my God,
never
like
used.
AI weaponized drones and shit like this nowadays.
There's
It's nuts.
many drones or just incredibly toxic gas that could just kill the whole country if they let loose.
Yep.
Indiscriminate, and let alone the nuclear weapons, which they've got enough to blow the world apart hundreds of times.
Well, let's not freak people out too much. I think it's probably time to wind it up a little bit.
I talked about that once before.
No, look, I'd love to get into it with you.
But another interview said the same thing.
Another time, we'll get you on again, and we can talk military shop.
Because you're talking.
No, I'm not cutting it out.
I'm not cutting it out. David, you're talking too matter-of-factly about
it's a salient point. I should mention we are at a venue here in Lismore at an event that's been convened for you and John Shipton, Julian Assange's father, who's here with you.
I'm missing the event.
We're missing the event, so we're going to round it up and get involved. We'll probably cut in some B-roll to show everyone what the background noises are if they come through on the recording.
Thank you for putting up with the background noises, which is...
Well, we may be able to engineer our way out of them, yeah. But I just want to say full kudos to you, man. And, thank you for following your truth. And you're on an epic journey. And in terms of killing it, I think you'll probably kill it in court.
Oh, I like it.
You've got the morality on your side. And, I wish you all the best
for
the journey.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Good luck in court,
Thank you for the interview. And again, if the viewers don't know, I was very late to the interview. They didn't can it.
Now we're getting looks from the people
which
in the background.
I do appreciate. I've decided to put you above whatever's going on.
That's all right. Look, I'm sure we'll get you on again.
Yeah, well, I wish you all the well. You've got a fantastic story. Likewise, I have to say,
thank you,
that you've got something about you which obviously people love, and I'm proud to be part of your podcast.
Thank you. That means so much.
Yeah. So and I hope to see more of you
absolutely,
and more of what you're doing.
Absolutely, it's good to see you smiling, man.
Yeah, it's good to do it. Like people like you feed off other people's energy. You make me smile.
Absolutely,
your supporters make me smile.
Kia kaha, brother. Stand strong. I feel like I don't need to tell you that, but
no, but we can round up. I like to hear it.
Maybe in closing, you can tell us the story of your snake tat.
It's one of those, and tat people will understand it. It's one of those things. You get the tat before you fully understand what it means, and then its meaning becomes more apparent as time goes on. But there is a passage, I'm going to have to give a plug to my book. There's a passage in the book, the introduction, about the snake that bites itself, an analogy about a certain country. And it's also got nice sort of demons, I guess. It's about my drug use, and you got to be careful what's within you, I guess. Yeah, it's got a few different meanings for me. Which I like, and it also looks kind of.
And of course, cool. We'd never associate drug use with any negative characteristics. I mean, you're a man of honor. You're a man that served his country. You're a highly educated, decorated fellow. And you deserve to be walking free, man. And keeping up the good fight. Right.
But I mean, you have to, it's been a long struggle. I drank too much and whatever. But that wouldn't cause me to do what I do, but that's what you have to survive. You can't help anybody when you're dead, and you've got to get through. But yeah, I don't condone that by any means. I almost didn't make it through. Truth is important. Authenticity is important. And I think people warm to that. And I always try to, as far as possible, as you would as well, otherwise your work would be meaningless, is to be as authentic. And I'm sure your viewers are very good. They're good. They've got natural inbuilt bullshit detectors. And that's why people warm to you, I guess. It's an unvarnished story, even if they don't know much about it. But it's the truth that you're not going to see on Channel 7.
Oh, it's coming. I'm going to leak the story soon, my friend.
Thank you. It's good to have a laugh, and you're right. We better go enjoy the party.
Let's do it.
You've got an infectious smile yourself. And thank you to your team.
Yeah, thank you, David. And hear from you soon, no doubt. And by the way, do you want to give your YouTube channel a bit of a plug?
Oh, yes. It's just David McBride. Major David McBride or something, I don't know, but yeah.
He's got a thriving channel. He's
Have a
pumping out
look
the
at-
content.
It's
Well
a
worth subscribing.
small channel, but there's a lot of good. I read chapters of my book if you don't want to listen to chapters. So the story time, that's quite popular. Friendly Geordies is on it, and I interviewed him, and yeah, maybe if I had more time, I'd interview you on it. Actually.
One day, I'm sure it'll happen.
We'll have. I don't need it because I'm on yours. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. All right, over and out.
Oh, that's good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That was pretty good. Thanks for hanging around.